Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show, and the unders have it. Who am I referring to? None other than the commenters over on YouTube, Facebook, and X, because Chris Freed over on YouTube set the number. He set the line. Over under on Russ being late is 3 minutes. Who's up for some action? Now, is that the reason that I made sure that I was here live? It was set for 2:35. We hit go at 2:37, and we did make it in under that 2:38, which means the unders have it, which is good because Alex Whiteleather said not looking good for the underbetters. Video guy Amadeo, ye of little faith. Amadeo, what are we doing here? Ye of little faith. Chris Freed, oh my God, just under 3 minutes late. Connor Buss says over 5. The under cashes. Here we are. Ford also says Russ should appear at the beginning dancing to that opening music. If only you knew the dance I was doing while the intro was playing. You probably wouldn't love the dance. In fairness, I don't think you would. I'm also realizing that the camera is slightly offline. It's too late. It's too late to fix it. Now, I was ready to go, but we had a little bit of like breaking media news, which if you pay attention for whatever reason to the thumbnails of the episode or the descriptions, maybe you didn't hit refresh. Some massive breaking news in the FS1 drama. We talked about it on Monday's show about how Joy Taylor's shows, or her show got canceled, along with Craig Carton's rebranded show got canceled. The Facility got canceled. I also screwed up. This is the part in the show where I always talk about, you have to kind of take accountability for when you're right. You have to take accountability for when you're wrong. Try not to do too many victory laps when you're right, because when you're wrong, people might dunk on you. I made a mistake on Monday's show, and I need to be fair. I need to hold myself to a higher standard, and many of you have come to expect that across YouTube, Facebook, and X. I made a boo-boo on Monday. When discussing Fox Sports 1 and the FS1 programming and the shows that were canceled, I repeatedly said the name Joy Reid instead of Joy Taylor. I then had people tweeting at me, I shit you not, tweeting bikini pictures of Joy Taylor at me. I guess to make the point that Joy Taylor and Joy Reid are certainly not the same person. Now, I mean no disrespect to Joy Reid. Maybe Joy Reid has pictures in a bikini somewhere that somebody is going to now harass me with. But I had Joy Taylor tweets at me. I didn't need them. I don't want them. But I said Joy Reid instead of Joy Taylor. And for those of you who are now, I guess, cursed with the idea of the other Joy in a bikini, I'm sorry, not my fault. But it is kind of my fault. So I always tell you that when I screw up, I'm going to take accountability. This is me taking accountability. I am sorry that I kept saying Joy Reid instead of Joy Taylor. I'm glad that we got that out of the way. I'm glad that we're able to kind of, move on from this, because that's really what matters, guys. That's what matters. It's all about accountability here on the Russ Joy Show. Now, we have a bunch of stuff to get into. On Monday's show, I said, hey, look at that. We have some Philly stuff to talk about. And we've gotten into a whole lot of stuff, but before we get really going underway, down here, bottom right corner of the screen, you can see a cute little box. That's where the comments are going to start populating. We already have some. You saw me pull that up. But as the comments come in, they're going to flow into that little comment box. I'll try to get to as many comments as I can. If you, for whatever reason, feel so moved by the spirit to leave a super chat, I will absolutely pull up your comment on the show today. If not, I will still try to get to as many comments as I can. It becomes a pretty lively comment section from time to time. So there's that. And by the way, there are two Sixers topics that I thought about including today. One is about Joel Embiid. There's a huge, long story up on ESPN.com that I got, I think, about a third of the way through. I would highly recommend reading it. It is like one of the most in-depth, behind-the-scenes conversations with Joel Embiid. And I got a third of the way through it, and I was going to kind of give some initial reactions. And I decided, no, it's not a good idea. So Friday, I'll probably delve further into, because there is some gut-wrenching stuff in that story that on a human level makes you go, oh. It makes you feel worse. For as critical as we can be of Joel Embiid, and sometimes it's fair and sometimes it's not, I think after you read that, if you choose to, you'll probably have a little bit of a different understanding, maybe an appreciation for some of the stuff the guy's been through. Get it. Multi-millionaire. Maybe you don't feel bad. So a third of the way through, I was like, oh. So we'll maybe get there Friday. And then, of course, Ford brings up one that, like, I don't even want to touch, because if I do this, I'm going to get angry, and I don't want to start the show angry. We have the Flyers' regular season schedule got released. We had some more nonsense around Jalen Hurts discourse with the national media. Of course, we had Kyle Schwarber do an incredible feat. For the first time ever, you go to the swing-off after the All-Star game, and he ultimately gets named All-Star MVP, which we're going to get to here in a little bit. So I like having a little bit of the positivity. And then, as I mentioned, there's a big media story because FS1, there were a few names, former ESPN names, like Tony Reale was kind of floated out there. We saw the name Kay Adams get floated out there, formerly of Good Morning Football, who's now with FanDuel. Could her name pop up? Max Kellerman, could he be going to FS1? I want to get to that story later, but I will. Here's your little teaser. Those aren't the names that just came out. Awful Announcing just pulled up with one hell of a drive-by that apparently Fox Sports is going to strike a deal with Barstool and with Dave Portnoy to put Portnoy on the Big Noon Kickoff show, and that they could simulcast or syndicate some of the Barstool content to replace some of those morning shows that they've fired. So, holy crapazoids. We're going to get there a little bit later on in the show, but I think it's pretty wild. Connor Buss also with a good point. Don't think we need to even bother talking about the Sixers at this point. Union top of the table. Kind of hard to argue. I saw that Kevin Kincaid tried to go down to a Union game, and then the skies opened. The clouds parted, and it was just a bevy of rain that came down. So Union is still having a very strong season. I think we might have to, at some point here, pay a little bit more attention to the Union. I think we might have to, because so far it's been a very good season. We might get back around to that. Connor Buss also dropping in Portnoy, becoming McAfee 2.0. We'll see. There's a lot to dissect there. But I want to start today, not where we left off the other day. We'll get to some of the Hurts discourse, because Colin Cowherd, who I've given a lot of props to, had a take that kind of made me almost rip some of my hair out. Some of this luscious lettuce that you see on top of my cabeza, above the 5 or 6 head. Depends on the day how many fingers you count for it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But I do want to start with the Flyers schedule release, because if you're a hockey fan, this is one of the very few days that you kind of like live for, I guess. And you try to figure out just how screwed is your team. Now, there are plenty of teams that are going to be actively competing for a Stanley Cup this year who are looking at their calendars right now saying, all right, this is okay, this is bad, this sucks, this is great. The Flyers are in a really weird spot because the start of their schedule is death. It is absolute death. There is no getting around it. The way that the Flyers season is set to begin is something that would make even the best teams probably feel at least slightly nauseous. And so we're going to break this thing down month by month, and I'm going to hit you with some of the major points that come out of it. Now, one thing that I will note ahead of time is that the Flyers are going to play not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, 14 back-to-backs this season. 14! Here's the bad news. If you wanted good news off of 14 back-to-backs, here's the bad news. Only 2 of those 14 back-to-backs are both going to be played at the Xfinity Mobile Arena, which means only 2 times out of 14 sets of back-to-backs, the Flyers will play both legs of that back-to-back at home. There are a few where they're split. Let's actually go there first. I'll pull this thing up. We'll see how we feel about it. By all means, you can let me know in the comments how you're feeling about it on YouTube, Facebook, and X. Remember, if you're on X, you have to click the video first to go into old Periscope mode. And if you comment there, I can bring it up on the screen. It'll also get added to the comments down here in the bottom right corner of the screen. All right, so I have to do this in a kind of weird way, but we'll figure it out together. This is not the prettiest graphic. I never said it was the prettiest graphic. This came courtesy of your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers. All right, here we go. I want you to take a look at these 14 back-to-backs, okay? Because this is what I was talking about, of being the real issue. So you can see their first back-to-back of the year is early November, November 1st and 2nd, home against Toronto, home against Calgary. They don't play another 2-leg home back-to-back again until April 13th and 14th, when they take on 2 likely playoff-bound teams, Carolina and Montreal. So they've bookended those double home back-to-backs, and the rest of it isn't the greatest. I mean, all right, so mid-November, St. Louis and Dallas, back-to-back on the road. You have an Islanders-Devils back-to-back on the road at the end of November. By the way, that November 28th game, one of the other big takeaways, that's Black Friday. Because of the Eagles playing on Black Friday, the Flyers aren't playing a Black Friday game at home. It will be against the Islanders. And then the next day, the next night, they're playing at New Jersey. They have a home-and-home with Carolina mid-December. They have a game at home against Vancouver, and then a relatively short trip to Chicago at the end of December, just before Christmas. Then you get to the very end of the year, right, end of the calendar year. That's when you end up out west. One nice thing that we'll see here in a minute is that the Flyers aren't starting out on a long West Coast trip, which is actually kind of nice for a change. But at the end of the calendar year, as you get ready to flip it over, at Vancouver, at Calgary, to end the calendar year. Then you're at Buffalo, at Pittsburgh, mid-January. You are at Columbus, at Boston at the end of January. You are at Washington, at the Rangers, which isn't that big of a deal, but that's at the end of February. Mid-March, home against Washington, at Minnesota. You go back out west, mid-March, at Anaheim, at Los Angeles, back-to-back. You have at Detroit versus Dallas, March 28th and 29th. And, of course, home against the Red Wings and then at the Islanders at the very beginning of April. So, again, 14 sets of back-to-backs seems kind of nuts. But there are other things that are, like, very notable in the schedule. So let's kind of pop it off this way, okay? Let's just take a goosey-goosey gander really quick. This is the overall schedule. And one of the things that you're going to notice, it's something that's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but in fairness, it's something that we've all kind of wanted, right? So you have this right here in February. So the Flyers will play on February 3rd and February 5th. They'll play home against Washington, home against Ottawa. Then you have a 20-day break from that Ottawa game to then playing at Washington. So you have a near 3-week gap break in the schedule for the Olympics. Now, in fairness, we all want to see NHL players competing in the Olympics. So I don't think there's anybody who's a real hockey fan who's going to complain about it, right? But it is important to kind of point out that is a 3-week break that actually does come at a pretty damn good time, very close to, it kind of gives you the ability that if you have your top-end players that are going to represent their countries in the Olympics, great, they get to go represent their countries. But if you have a bunch of guys who aren't going to be Olympic caliber players, and the Flyers will have plenty of them, those guys get to go home and rest the bodies for 3 weeks. Those guys get to get ready for that push, that final 3-game stretch in February, that tough month of March, that month of April. And again, although I'm a little bit less bullish than I was because I thought the Flyers would try to go out and get a guy who's like 1A caliber like an Ersson to kind of compete with him, Vladar could be fine maybe. I still think they're going to be in the race for a playoff spot late in the season. So if nothing else, you're going to be able to get a lot of your younger guys healthy. You're going to be able to get some of your vets some much needed time away for a few weeks in February and maybe go into a stretch run where that disparity between the top teams and that middle of the table kind of team, those top 3, top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference, and then let's say the next 5 or 6 teams, right, that could end up being the remainder of the playoff field and then the teams that are kind of competing for that wild card, that disparity might actually get narrowed a bit because you would think that a lot of those top-end teams are going to have a lot of guys playing in the Olympics, whereas those teams that are battling for a wild card spot or maybe are 7th or whatever in the conference might not have quite as many Olympic players. They can get healthy. It could actually lead to a really interesting scenario in the playoffs. Again, this all comes down to injuries. It all comes down to overall health of your team. But I like the chaos that the Olympic break might end up causing and the fact that you could end up seeing a higher likelihood that a healthier team gets into the playoffs as a slightly lower seed and maybe pulls off an upset because of it. So I'm still convinced the Flyers are going to be in that conversation. Joe Papel says need one more bottom 10, Russ. I don't, as of right now, I don't see them being a lottery-bound team. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. But we'll see. I mean, anything can happen. So here's the real tough spot if you're the Flyers. I'm going to switch this out really quick. The first month of the season is death. I mean, I know that I said it's death, but like you need to look at it with me because it's absolutely brutal. This is the kind of thing that just like should not happen, but it's happening. The start of the season is about as awful as you could have ever feared it would be. I'm trying to do this in a way that it's not going to break my system. All right, let's see. We'll get that down. We'll go here. All right, we'll try to do this. Let's see if this works. I think it will. And there we go. Yes. All right, cool. That looks better. October. We have to look at this. The Flyers are going to play the reigning Stanley Cup champions twice in the first 3 games. They are going to play twice against the Panthers in their first 3 games of the season. And interspersed between those games, the Hurricanes. So you've got Panthers, Hurricanes, Panthers, then the Jets, Minnesota, Seattle, Ottawa, Islanders, Penguins, Predators. That could be an absolutely horrific start to the season. I mean, you're going to go on the road the first 2 games of the season at Florida, at Carolina. That's rough. You get to come home and you feel like, oh, little home cooking. You have 4 straight games at home. Florida, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Seattle. Then you're at Ottawa, a team that I keep being told by people, well, it might surprise people. Okay, maybe. Then you're home again against an Islanders team that's going to be much improved, a Pittsburgh team that is probably going to go through some struggles, but they're still a legitimate rival, and then a Nashville team that's going to desperately be looking to bounce back off of a year that no one saw coming. So that's kind of brutal. Not a great way to start your season. That's tough. I don't care what anybody says. That's about as tough as it gets. And listen, if you zoom out the rest of the schedule, there are things about it that you feel kind of iffy about. Now, we talked about the back-to-backs, but it really is that first month of the season that, to me, is like the holy shit moment. Now, again, you bookend those back-to-backs, those home back-to-backs, early in the season, end of the season. I want you guys to take a look really quickly with me at what's going to happen in April, because March is a really packed month. Ton of games, right, because of the Olympic break. But if you take an actual goosey gander at what this team is going to have to do down the stretch to try to make a playoff spot. Like if I'm going to be right that the Flyers are going to be closer to making the playoffs than making the lottery, they're going to have to fight through this. And in fairness, I don't know how they're going to do it. They'll be home against Detroit. Okay. At the Islanders, again, a much improved team. Home against Boston. We'll see. At the Devils, who should be better than they were last year. At Detroit, at Winnipeg, and then your last 2 games of the season are against teams that you would expect. Remember, this is one of the ones that we outlined at the beginning of the show. This is your second of 2 home back-to-backs. Home against Carolina, home against Montreal. The only hope that you have at that point is maybe Carolina have solidified their position in the playoffs, and maybe they'll look to take it a little bit easier, rest a couple of guys. That Montreal game could end up being for one of those last playoff spots, could end up being for a wild card spot. So that's kind of rough. It's not ideal. And the worst part, like if we have to go back through like what is the actual I guess biggest negative of it all, when you go back and you look at that October schedule, you are burning 7 of your home games, 7 of your 41 home games, right? That's tough. It's like, what, almost 16% of your season? Let's see, hold on. Can I get the calculator here? 7 divided by 41. What did I say, 16%? 17 point, well, it would be round up, 17.1%. That's pretty good. Good mental math up here. Thanks to all my math teachers along the way for helping with that arithmetic. But you're burning about 17% of your home games in that first month of October. That's rough. That's brutal. And it's against very good competition. So we'll see what happens. But this is like one of those things that people get excited about before everything actually gets real. Now, in fairness, training camp will be coming up before you know it. The preseason will hit before you know it. The games will get going before you know it. I mean, hell, We are now past the midway point of July. I know. It feels gross. It feels disgusting. It shouldn't be happening. This isn't how the world is supposed to work. July, when it comes, is supposed to be like, oh, we just got through June. July is so long, and then August is so far away, and then everybody goes back to school, and all the teachers go back to work, and then you get your home back to yourself without people trying to knock down the door every few minutes in between meetings to ask, can I have a snack? 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 Forgetting that their mom is available and readily available to say, no, you can't have a snack. You just didn't eat your lunch. I'm not projecting. I'm just pointing out that the back to school time is not a bad time here. But it does feel like the summer's practically over. We have a month until everybody really does start to go back to school. Think about that. That's crazy. Okay. I'm going to go over to the comments really quick, and then we're going to keep moving. We'll keep the conversation moving forward. Greg Bondarenko says Flyer schedule is a bit interesting. Feel free to elaborate on that there, Greg, and we'll go from there. Let's see. Amadeo says first 5 games of Flyer season is brutal. That is true. And I mentioned the fact that, there are teams that are going to compete for a cup, and they're all excited to break down their schedules. Fawcett says Flyers ain't one. Chris Reed says they are not one of those teams. Greg Bondarenko says, I don't think I've seen so many games at home in the beginning of the season. I couldn't tell you the last time. I mean, remember, we typically are used to seeing the Flyers start out west, so it's pretty interesting to note that it isn't happening. Connor Buss says there's anti-Soviet bias here. NHL hates the Soviet Flyers. Amadeo also says, so the midnight game was never on the table. Okay, can we have this conversation really quickly? I know that people were throwing out this idea on social media for a while. Oh, the Eagles are playing on Black Friday. What if the Flyers played at midnight on Black Friday? That was never going to happen. Ever. I mean, maybe, but never. Conceptually, could I have been convinced to go down and cover a midnight Flyers game? You're damn right. I would be thrilled because I love the crazy hours. When games end up going later and later and later into the night and your filter starts to go away and things just start to unravel and go kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs when you're covering a game, I'm down with that. The idea of getting down to Wells Fargo Center at 10:30 p.m., a 12 o'clock puck drop, and we're getting out of there at 2:30, 3 a.m., I'm here for it. That'd be a lot of fun. But no, I don't think it was going to happen. I would assume that it's as much of an NHLPA thing as an NHL thing, where they'd say, what about the safety, people trying to drive, all that. Would be interesting, though. A midnight game would have been pretty cool. Let's see. Chris Freed says, this schedule gives Russ the off-ramp from his playoff dreams. I need you to remember, because I know I've somehow become this optimistic guy about the Flyers and about their chances. And we all know that I'm realistic, and a lot of times being realistic means saying the Flyers stink. But in this case, I do still have a belief that this team is going to have a legitimate shot at making the playoffs. The goaltending can't be worse than it was in 2024-25. Flashes forward to a cutout on a social media post that video guy Amadeo makes for TikTok and posts in April of 2026. They can't be worse. The goaltending cannot be worse. Dan Vladar could vomit all over himself in net for half of his starts, and he would still be more consistent than Alexei Kolosov. He won't, he's a big guy, but he's not as big as Fedotov, but they can't be worse. I mean, unless Sam Ersson has a debilitating season-ending injury early, and then it becomes Vladar and Fedotov, or Vladar and I don't know who else. Okay, fine. Then maybe the goaltending will be worse at that point. But if health is even remotely in play, the goaltending can't be worse. And if the goaltending is even marginally better than it was a year ago, that automatically to me gets you out of that top 10 of the NHL draft lottery. We'll go draft lottery because we saw teams jump up. Islanders and Utah. Then add to it that Rocky Thompson's gone, and the Rocky Thompson horror show is gone, and you've now added Trevor Zegras to the mix, and maybe Porter Martone's going to make the team, or an Alex Bump. Those guys could help your power play. You have another year of Matvei Mishkov. You have a healthy Travis Konechny. You have a Jamie Drysdale who hopefully will get to have a full offseason at full health, be able to attack the season to start in a big, meaningful way and will rediscover some confidence in his game, that power play cannot be worse than it was under Rocky Thompson in 2024-2025. So if you have a much improved power play and the goaltending is even remotely better, and you are still adding some talent to this roster, which I would say on aggregate, if you have a guy like Martone or Bump or both make the team, I'd say their ceilings are probably higher than the guys that they're replacing. Like, I would argue that if a Martone somehow makes this team out of camp, you should expect to get production that is similar to even a down year by like a Joel Farabee who you got rid of. You should, in theory, be able to replace Ryan Paling's points on this team through some combination of players. You should be okay. If Jet Lachenko makes the team out of camp, you would certainly hope that he's able to like give you something at center. You would a million times over hope that Trevor Zegras is going to be a better 1C or 2C than you had through much of last season. I would say that there were a couple of times where you had little windows of Sean Couturier looking like Sean Couturier as a 1 or a 2C at times. But if Zegras can be even remotely dependable in one of those top 2 center spots, it is going to pay massive dividends for those wings. And sure, we know Tyson Forster probably will miss time to start the season. How much? No one seems to know. He will likely miss some time. You would hope that that center depth improving is going to give you better production overall from a Mishkov who's coming back in year 2, from an Owen Tippett who Rick Tocchet seems to believe he's going to be able to unlock something in, from a Forster when he's back. Like, there should be guys that will improve on this team, if for no other reason than center looks a little bit stronger than it did last year. Now, if Zegras can't play center, well, then okay, then you're in pretty deep doo-doo. If he has to become a wing for you and you have to like force Lachenko onto the roster, all right, then we might have a conversation about, not great. Chris Freed says, is Tocchet going to run a hard camp like Torts? If he doesn't, this team is going to get buried in October. I don't know how hard of a camp it's going to be to start. I would assume that he's going to set the tone. It is his first year in town. I do think that there's at least a small part of him that knows you can't lose the locker room immediately by kind of like doing a replication of the kind of camp Torts used to do. Jamie Rollo with a little bit of friction here, but that's okay. Friction starts fire, and sometimes you need fire. Like in my big green egg, where I've been making a brisket since 9:30 last night. It's now resting in a cooler. I will report back on Friday. Jamie says, I'm not buying what you're selling, Russ. This is still not a playoff team, not with that goaltending. You might be right. I like to look at the end of the season as the Flames were trying to make a playoff push. Vladar actually played pretty well. And I don't think Ersson sucks. But I do think that the injuries, the groin injuries that Ersson had a year ago, prevented him from finding any kind of consistency. Let's see. Greg Bondarenko says, can somebody explain who goofed up a consecutive home game stand of playing Tampa twice? No idea. Also, I don't know how you end up with Florida for 2 of the first 3 games of the season. That doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't see a team 2 out of 3 times that early in the season, especially the Stanley Cup champions who are going for a 3-peat. Why? Amadeus says it was Gary Bettman. Amy, looking at the first 11 games of the season, says 6-5 through October. Be positive. Amy, if that happens, make sure you come back at the start of the season and remind everybody how you were optimistic. And you were right. And we'll shout it out. Let's see. Joe Papel says, you still need a 1C, a 1D, and a real number 1 goaltender. Hard to see them moving up 8 slots. The UFA signings didn't move the needle. They were mostly marginal signings. Dvorak, fine. Vladar, fine. Pair of guys that are going to probably battle for the number 7 defenseman job, fine. Whatever. You're right. They're not needle movers. It does feel like they are 100% building up for a very star-studded class of free agents in 2026. They just better hope that those guys don't re-sign with their current teams before they even have a chance to make a pitch. Nick Johnson says, still a rebuild. Says, even if the Flyers are in a playoff spot, I don't see Danning holding on to Dvorak. Could be right. I mean, here's the thing. It depends on what the asset is that you get back for Dvorak, right? Like, if you are 10 points out of a playoff spot by the trade deadline, Does trading Dvorak really change your ceiling as a team? No, it might change your floor a little bit, but then it depends on, like, let's say Luchenko doesn't play for the Flyers much of the season at all. And then you get to the trade deadline. You say, you know what, Dvorak's been good for us. He's given us some good minutes at center, but we think that Luchenko playing with Guelph to that point, it's been fine. And then late in the season, you're going to call him up and you think he's going to be able to provide similar production. Cool, then do it. Then you're fine. That's okay. Let's see. Joe says Florida Panthers in October are not the May or June Panthers. That's also true. We'll see. Back to the idea of the Black Friday game. Connor says a tailgate for a midnight game would be phenomenal. Oh, it'd be brutal. It would be absolutely brutal. Tony Louis says, please don't make the Flyers open with a 5-game West Coast trip to start the season with all the games starting at 10:30. Me today. I wish we started with a 5-game road trip out west again. Yeah, it's that's one thing that I noticed on the calendar. Let me see, hold on. I can pull this back up. There was a notable thing, like when it came to late games. Here we go. Bring this back up. If you take a look at this, you'll notice something crazy important. The Flyers do not have a late West Coast game in the month of October. They don't have a late West Coast game in the month of November. They do not have a late West Coast game in the month of December until December 30th at Vancouver. That is the first legitimately late game they have, that 10 o'clock. We can count Chicago at 9 o'clock if you really want to here. And yes, there are some like 8 o'clock games earlier in the season, but your first like 10 o'clock or later game doesn't happen until December. If you look ahead to January, they don't have a game that late. They do have a Utah game at 9:30 and a Colorado game at 9. So they're on the later side, but not all the way late. Nothing in February that makes you kind of go, ooh. The real tough stretch, I guess, and we can all stay up for this. Maybe we'll do like live watch shows for these, but like at Anaheim, at Los Angeles in March, 10 and 10:30 starts. One of the back-to-backs that's away. But like other than that, you don't have a whole lot of late night starts. A 9 o'clock start, for as inconvenient as it isn't like a make or break in terms of like, at least for me, in terms of, am I going to stay up and watch this or am I going to watch it the next morning on DVR? 10 and 10:30, I've got to be like ready to go for it. I have to be mentally locked in to like want to stay up. I also just like the idea of watching a game on DVR the next day. I can avoid all the spoilers. I can avoid all the commercials and just watch the game and enjoy it for what it is. But I do like it. It's certainly better than, again, starting with like a 5-game road trip. A lot of 10 o'clock starts. I mean, it's better. Amadeo says Bjarnason could become the savior. I think it's going to be this week. I want to drop the Bjarnason interview that we did over on Snow the Goalie at Dev Camp because it is, I think, one of the very best interviews we've done on that show. Bjarnason is a very interesting dude. Tony Louis says goaltending might be better, but they'll run it back again with the same exact group of defensemen minus Ristolainen to start the season. They're not making the playoffs with that group of defensemen. Tony, you might be right. I also want to, let me see something. I changed this at some point. I think I like that better. I think I like I like the bubble. I think the bubble's good. We're going to go back to the bubble. These are the small things that I noticed during the show. Let's see. Nick Johnson says, anyone who thinks this team can't make the playoffs hasn't looked at the Metro last season. That division is wide open. Do they need another rebuild year? 110%, but they can make the playoffs. And also says that he hopes that the rebuild continues. And I think that's the thing. Last year I kept talking about how the Eastern Conference as a whole, not even just the Met, the Eastern Conference as a whole had a lot of bad teams, like really bad teams. And then there was certainly like the tier of elite or elite adjacent teams. And then you just had like a bunch of dudes. It was just a bunch of teams, a bunch of nothing, a bunch of like nothing that gets you really excited. I haven't seen like massive overhauls of rosters in a way that makes me say, oh, the Metropolitan Division is just a runaway where you have 3-4 teams that are just head and shoulders above the rest. I think it is a pretty wide open division. Jay Grubby's here with a good afternoon, Russell and Russettes. Hello. Hello, Jay. Mike over here says, I hope the Marner signing makes it more likely Eichel goes to unrestricted free agency. Would love to see him in orange and black. There was a time on Snow the Goalie that I like pounded the table. And I was like, look, I know the Flyers aren't going to go out and get Jack Eichel. But like the dude's going to get the surgery he wants or he's going to get his neck fixed. And when he does, he's going to be a really damn good player. There's a reason that he was taken where he was in the draft. And I just don't see a scenario. Here's the problem, right? A guy like Eichel, if you want to really live in fantasy land, McDavid, any of these other free agents that you're like starting to kind of emotionally attach yourselves to, there has to be something that leads to one of those guys choosing a team that might barely make the playoffs or is going to miss the playoffs again in the Flyers, right? Like, I don't think any of us right now have the Flyers like slated to be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. And if that's the case, there has to be something to sell these free agents on. Playing with Matvei Mishkov, awesome. Konechny, great. If the idea here is like, hey, Konechny and Sanheim might represent Team Canada in the Olympics again or be in camp, nifty galifty, we can get behind it. There has to be something. There has to be something that draws players here. Is it going to be Rick Tocchet? Is it going to be Danny Briere and Keith Jones and the relationship with the agents and all the things that we've heard? I don't know. But it feels very hard to imagine right now that these guys who could go pretty much anywhere with cap space, which, hint, hint, a year from now is going to be a lot of teams. It's just hard to imagine one of those guys saying, yeah, I want to go to a team that just missed the playoffs or a team that like got curb stomped in the first round unless there is a reason to do so. Now, Amadeo says bribery. I don't think that's going to be it, but maybe. So anyway, that was the schedule, guys. It's not great, but it's not as bad as it could have been. And I think that's a good place to leave that. That's all I got to say about that. Now, I saw there are people over on Twitter that I think are trying to reply to the show, and they didn't do the thing where you click the video first and then put the comment, so I can't pull it up on the screen, but that's okay. We have that. Now, I want to kind of shift gears here a little bit because we talked about Jalen Hurts on Monday's show, and we talked about the fact that, like, a lot of these national media people, and we had both ESPN and FS1 represented on this show, including at least one show that got canceled in the time since. But there were some pretty wild takes going on in the national media since Monday's show about Jalen Hurts. And I'm going to throw it first to a guy that you could pretty much always guarantee is going to have the Eagles back, is certainly going to have Jalen Hurts back. And that's none other than Kyle Brandt. Because Kyle Brandt tends to be one of the, more outspoken guys. He's a louder voice, but man, he typically has his pulse. He has his finger on the pulse of the league. What about to Kyle Brandt? Because again, if you remember, Jalen Hurts, number 9 quarterback on a list of the top 10 quarterbacks in the National Football League, according to executives, coaches, and scouts. And we kind of dissected why that was nonsense on Monday. There's actually another bit of info, and it had to do with wide receivers, which we'll get to in a bit. But I want to go out to Kyle Brandt first because I just like listening to Kyle Brandt get passionate about the Eagles.
What are we talking about? What is this BS? What is this straw man phantom who is coming up with this Jalen Hurts is an overrated passenger take in the middle of July? I don't understand it. Is he the best quarterback in the league? Is he the top 5? Is he 6? Is he 8? Is he 3? Who cares? He is the best quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I know you look back at him last year and you're like, well, he doesn't have these astronomical statistics. Well, he was playing with a running back who jumps over people backwards, all right? It's like being like, Christian Bale wasn't a very good Batman. Well, it's because he was stepping aside for the Joker. Are you seeing what the Joker is doing? It's incredible. It's not Christian Bale's fault. He did the job he was supposed to do, just like Jalen Hurts did. And all I will say is this. What defines a great quarterback? What makes up your list? Isn't it when they play their best football against the best opponent on the biggest stage? Because he went out against Chiefs team, and the ball barely hit the ground, and he shredded them, and he posted this big, fat, turgid rating that no one else had done that year. Not Lamar, not the MVP Josh, not Burrow. Jalen Hurts throwing the ball against this Chiefs defense made it one of the worst Super Bowls I've ever seen in my life. So make your list, have your takes. Who cares? I don't care if he's 32nd or 1st. He is number 1 for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're the best team in football.
So, there's your Kyle Brandt of the day. And he's right. And again, this came back to some of the stuff that we talked about on Monday's show about what do you value the most? Isn't the thing that you're supposed to value the most the guy who ultimately leads your team to a Super Bowl, preferably wins it, and a guy who is a Super Bowl MVP? The Justin Herbert love is wild. I will stand resolute in the belief that Joe Burrow, despite being a very good quarterback, still remains an overrated quarterback because the playoffs have been an issue. Rough starts to regular seasons are not entirely on him, but they have been a consistent theme, especially over the last few years. And then you have guys that can't make the playoffs, can't get the job done, can't find a way to get past Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs in the AFC, and yet we're supposed to believe that they're top 2 guys, they're top 3 guys, they're top 4 guys. Like, I'm just not totally sold on it. Now, the thing that was the most surprising, though, the thing that honestly was disappointing, was I saw Colin Cowherd with some thoughts on Jalen Hurts. And I truly thought that it was going to be a better take than this. And I found myself being legitimately disappointed because, as I've said on this show a bunch of times, I really do think that Colin Cowherd is one of the best who talks into a microphone and talks about sports on a national level. And so, really quickly, I found a shorter version because the 3-minute version made me almost rip my hair out. But I want to go out to Colin Cowherd quick because he has this like rationale for why he thinks that Jalen Hurts could be number 9 and why it's a fair evaluation, which it's not, but we'll go out here real quick.
Coaches and scouts released their top 10 quarterback, and it went in this order: Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Matt Stafford, Justin Herbert, Goff, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield.
I still don't get the Goff thing. That's another one that I don't understand, but we'll keep going.
About as close to my list as you can get. The reaction on Jalen Hurts, who, wins the Super Bowl being 9, was predictable. This is a bunch of
Sirianni, by the way, came out and said it's bullshit. We'll keep going.
nonsense. I can't believe it. Take a deep breath. The Eagles' offense was top 10 in everything: pass blocking, run blocking, rushing, receiving. Yet they were 21st in actually passing.
Interesting. Like the top 10 in receiving, but you're 21st in passing is weird, but okay.
Oh, by the way, 11 of his 32 total touchdowns came on rushes of 1 or fewer yards. Take out the tush push, he had the same number of touchdowns as Bryce Young.
Well, it's a shame that, you have to actually count the play. It is a shame that, like, just because it fits a narrative, you have to actually acknowledge that those are still touchdowns. Sure. Yeah. Fine. Yeah, he's Bryce Young.
Passed the ball less than any team in the NFL at 24 times a game. Jalen Hurts is...
That was post-bye week. There was a post-bye week adjustment, but we're going to get to that because somebody who talked into that same microphone actually refuted his point a day before.
Responsible for that.
All right, so that was Colin Cowherd. Now, the reason that I show you that is because, as I mentioned, somebody who was on his show, somebody who was talking into that same microphone a day before was Jason McIntyre. And here's the beauty of what Jason McIntyre had to say. He goes on, he's filling in for Colin Cowherd on The Herd, and he absolutely decimates this argument about Hurts not being a good pocket passer, about Hurts not being able to get the job done. I'm going to cut into part of why it's all nonsense, right? Because we talk about this whole idea that, well, Jalen Hurts isn't as good of a pocket passer as some of these other guys. He's certainly not the pocket passer that Burrow is. He's not even as good of a pocket passer as Lamar, not as good of a pocket passer as Josh Allen. Somehow Jared Goff. Sure. Really quick. We're going to throw it out here because these are stats that when you get into arguments online, when you get into arguments with your friends, your group chat, your dad, your uncle, these are some numbers that are going to be worth kind of throwing out there about last year.
Than Jalen Hurts. Oh, Jared Goff was the number 1 overall pick. That's right. First impressions matter.
So this is a good point, by the way, and I cut most of it out. But McIntyre talks about how Hurts is the only guy who wasn't a first-round pick. And so there's this notion out there that because you were taken in the first round, because Jared Goff was taken as high as he was in the first round, that kind of sets this expectation going forward that he must be as good as whatever that draft pick was. He must be as good as a first-round pick. So we're going to extend him grace because he was a first-rounder. Hurts wasn't. But here you go.
Now, we did have a spirited chat because I'm very bullish on Hurts. I have him unequivocally number 5. These executive coaches and scouts have Jaden Daniels at 5, and that's fine. Jaden Daniels was amazing last year. Let's see the numbers on Jalen Hurts from the pocket, because this is the big knock on Jalen Hurts.
We're going to pause on it. Take a look at those numbers. Jalen Hurts from the pocket in 2024 in the regular season. 74% completion percentage, 8.5 yards per pass attempt, 109.7 passer rating. Those are respectively 2nd, 3rd, and 5th in the NFL. He threw 14 touchdowns from the pocket, only 4 interceptions.
He doesn't win from the pocket. Oh, really? Well, I have actual data that flies in the face of the idea that Hurts doesn't win from the pocket. He was 2nd in completion percentage, And it's not a check down Turley.
And we're actually going to, I think we're going to skip ahead because this is the other part that I wanted to get to. I just like the graphic. Jason McIntyre did a good job, but it's more about the graphics. Look at the completion percentage year over year over year. 2024 was the highest completion percentage he had. And just a reminder, 2 of these 3 years, the Eagles went to a Super Bowl. And in both years, Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl. 72.6%, 71%, 74%. The touchdown to interception ratio got kind of weird in that 2023 season where they had the internal promotion at offensive coordinator that did not work out. Your passing yards per attempt, roughly the same 2022 and 2024. Passer rating jumped back up considerably, almost 18 points from where it was in 2023. This notion that he's not a good pocket passer is kind of nonsensical. Now, there are people like Colin Cowherd who will point out the fact that the Eagles didn't throw the ball nearly as much as other teams and that they were 21st in passing, and all that is fair. It's about the efficiency of that passing game. Hurts executes. But when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley in the backfield, you're going to feed that beast. And when that guy realistically could have broken the regular season rushing record if you had played him in the final game of the season, or if he had decided to go back into that Giants game where he said, no, let the young guys eat. Like, if you have that guy, you're going to get that guy involved in the game. That's how it's supposed to work. It's part of a balanced attack. When Hurts was called upon to pass and pass from the pocket, albeit not as many times as some of the other guys on the top 10 list, he executed. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. And ultimately, he delivered a Super Bowl to this team. Those other guys, many of them haven't even sniffed a Super Bowl. That's all for today on that. I just wanted to make sure that we got that on the record. Anthony DeGrazio with a good point. Why throw it when you have the best back in the league? That is correct. Christopher Menza is in one of my favorite places. Greetings from Corolla, North Carolina. When you coming down, Russ? I don't know. If it happens, I'll let you know. But I really want to get back to Outer Banks. I do. A lot. It's my favorite place to go in the summer. I'll let you know if and when it happens. Okay. That was that piece. Now, really quick, because I see where we're at on time. Kyle Schwarber did something that no one has ever done before. Kyle Schwarber took over the All-Star game last night. The All-Star game ended up in a swing-off, which I then saw led to a bunch of very wild discourse on radio today, especially in Philadelphia. And I was going back and forth on whether or not I wanted to give that conversation some oxygen, and I still might. But Schwarber ends up in this swing-off, and it's essentially a home run derby with the team that ends up with more home runs winning the All-Star game, which is actually kind of cool, especially for an exhibition game. Why not? Schwarber goes up, and he gets 3 at-bats, he gets 3 swings, and he knocks all 3 of those swings out of the park. And ultimately, the National League beats the American League. Schwarber gets named All-Star Game MVP. And then you feel the tightness in the city of Philadelphia because everybody's excited, right? Anybody who's watching the All-Star Game who is a Phillies fan wants to watch Kyle Schwarber go up and hit Schwarbombs. You want him to be like Big Al. My name's Big Al. And I hit dingers. That's what we want out of Kyle Schwarber. You want to watch Schwarber crush the ball. Kind of disappointed that he didn't do the home run derby, but I get it. Here he gets to have a mini home run derby, and all 3 of his swings go out of the ballpark. And he gets named All-Star Game MVP. And you feel the excitement as a Phillies fan, and then you remember Dave Dombrowski didn't sign him long-term in the offseason. And that according to some reports, the Phillies number wasn't even remotely close. And so again, I ask, what are we doing? What are you doing, Dave Dombrowski? What is the point? What is the point of any of it? I mean, we talk about windows. We talk about untouchable prospects that aren't exactly lighting up the world in the minors right now. We talk about the idea that you need to maximize your talent window with guys like JT Realmuto, with Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, Zach Wheeler, who has an expiration date of 2027. He's put his own expiration date on the packaging. You can see it. That light at the end of the tunnel isn't like an escape from anything. It is the expiration date of Zach Wheeler, an oncoming train about to smash you in the face. And this team didn't prioritize bringing back Kyle Schwarber. They didn't prioritize giving him a longer-term deal. They've given it to anybody else. Trey Turner's here in perpetuity. You have Bryce Harper here for the second half of a contract when he's had issues remaining healthy. You have all these things going on. Kyle Schwarber, of all the people, Kyle Schwarber, who's like your only legitimate power bat. You couldn't figure out a way to bring him back. And now he's leading your team in homers. He really does look like the only threat at the plate to go yard. He goes out and now he's an All-Star Game MVP. And listen, it doesn't really change much, right? Like teams that were going to be interested in Kyle Schwarber anyway are going to remain interested in Kyle Schwarber. The All-Star Game MVP isn't going to take a team that like hadn't previously thought about it and say, oh, you know what? I'd like to see Kyle Schwarber come to my team and hit dingers in my park as well. I hadn't thought about it until I saw him hit 3 of them in the All-Star Game. That's not going to happen. But it's just another one of those, here's an accolade, here's something the guy did. He shows up at the moments that you need him to most. That was clutch. I get it. It's not a playoff game. But he goes up there, 3 swings, 3 home runs. And then you think about next year. I just want everybody to like hop into the future, the little time machine thing. Let's go a year in advance. If the Phillies don't bring back Kyle Schwarber, is Kyle Schwarber going to go to a team and hit home runs? He will. Will Kyle Schwarber put on another team's uniform a year from now, walk into Citizens Bank Park for the All-Star Game, participate in the Home Run Derby, and piss off every Phillies fan? Not because we're not gonna boo Kyle Schwarber. If Schwarber chooses to leave at the end of the year, and all this stuff comes out about how the Phillies undercut, didn't make him a legitimate offer, we're gonna cheer the shit out of Kyle Schwarber. But we're going to boo the hell out of Dave Dombrowski and whoever has been involved in not getting this guy signed. And then next year, Schwarber comes back in an opposing uniform. Guess what? That ballpark is going to pop off. They're going to cheer for him, and they're going to be pissed as hell at the front office that totally dropped the ball again and again and again and again and again. Because make no mistake, not re-signing Kyle Schwarber isn't like a one-time mistake. You could have done it last season. You could have done it last offseason. You could have done it during spring training. You could have done it through the first half of this regular season. You played with fire, and there's a very good chance you're going to get burned. And even if you don't, let's just envision a scenario where Kyle Schwarber decides he wants to come back to Philadelphia. Do you think his price has gone down after the first half of a season? Then you think it's going to go down? If he remains your most consistent power bat and like clears the rest of this lineup considerably, like it looks like he might, you think that price is going to come down? I'm sorry, like, where's the logic? Who made the call? What? And by the way, if the Phillies did make him a really strong offer, maybe even an above market kind of value, and he chose not to take it, somebody better start leaking that shit soon. I mean, like, second half of the season soon. Because if that story doesn't come out until the offseason, if he like goes and signs, and I saw this, like Chris Fried says, if he signs with the Mets, we're going to boo him with batteries in hand. If he signs with the Mets, we'll be pissed. But I think we'd still go like, all right, well, the Phillies must have screwed it up. You can't, if he goes and signs elsewhere, then be like,
well, the Phillies did make a competitive offer in the 2024-2025 offseason where they tried to get him, and, you know, he actually ended up getting a little bit less money by going to another team.
If you're getting strung along this entire time, this entire season, you're continuing to perform, and this team still isn't willing to give you what you are worth, that's a problem. And if a guy sours on that and ultimately takes less money, you can't blame him. I mean, to some extent, we've seen that in the fallout of what happened with like Yabusele leaving the Sixers for the Knicks. Like Daryl Morey kind of came out and said something to the effect of like he thought that they could have been in position to give Yabusele more money than he got from the Knicks, but like he would have had to wait a little bit, but Yabusele said there was no actual contract offer. Like, all this crap. If you string a guy along for long enough, might not be thrilled. Might not be thrilled. And ultimately might go and leave for a division rival, which would suck. Anthony DeGrazia says a Philadelphia sports team's front office dropping the ball. That doesn't happen here. Let's see. Joe Papel says this would be like Ruben Amaro not protecting Ryan Howard when Jason Worth was a free agent. Why can fans see a window closing when the GM misses it? Because sometimes when you're so far in the forest, you can't see the trees. Like that, there is a part of this where I do wonder if the Phillies are overvaluing their prospects and overvaluing their ability to replace some of these guys. I get it conceptually. If Kyle Schwarber at his age and with his ability and lack thereof in the field wants like a 7-year deal. All right, fine. You can't. You can't. A 7-year deal would be crazy. But the idea that like you couldn't give this guy boku bucks on a shorter term deal, but like legitimately boku bucks, seems crazy to me. Amadeo says John Middleton's penny pitching will spend, but only to an extent. In fairness, at some point, the return on investment has to be worth it, though. Like at some point, when you go out and you dole out all the money that he has for Castellanos and Schwarber and Harper and Turner, you do need to see some kind of return. And it, in fairness, like it hasn't exactly been there on a lot of these guys. Schwarber's maybe the exception to the rule. And of course, Harper for a few really good years, MVP years, sure. In terms of like being able to woo these free agents and like have legitimate chances of going to the World Series, maybe even winning it, Harper's been worth it. Turner this year has been better, but certainly not the guy that you thought he was going to be. Castellanos, I don't think has ever been the guy that you were hoping that you would get. So, you got that. Okay. That's the Schwarber of it all. Now we have to get to the last story of the day. I think this is the last story, right? We did the Philly stuff, we did the Eagle stuff, we did the Flyer stuff. Yes. Here's the last thing that we need to get to today. Because I led the show with telling you that this is kind of crazy. If you remember the other day, Joy Taylor, not Joy Reid, was, I guess, informed that her contract wouldn't be renewed. And Fox Sports 1 decided they were going to axe 3 programs: Speak, The Facility, and Craig Carton's show, which I forget what the actual name of it was on the rebrand of it, the second attempt to get Craig Carton's show off the ground. But the names were going around. And so for like a day and a half, the name Tony Reale, obviously formerly of Around the Horn, Max Kellerman, who actually hosted Around the Horn before Tony Reale, who was a fixture on First Take, a guy who has been all over the place and is certainly like a voice of boxing to a lot of people. He's also out there. And the name Kay Adams, who again rose to fame mostly on the back of her work on Good Morning Football, has stayed very relevant, and you'll see her all over social media doing her show. Those names came up. And so there were a ton of people, including myself, who tweeted then like, can you imagine if you're FS1, you get rid of these 3 shows and you're somehow able to bring back some combination of a Reale, Kellerman, and Kay Adams? That'd be bonkers. It'd be bananagrams. But like that's the kind of talent you would have to bring in to like maybe give yourselves a chance to compete against whatever ESPN has going on in the morning between Get Up and First Take. You couldn't beat First Take head-to-head with a similar style show. Like, yes, FS1 was probably at its best when you had Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp on Undisputed. They were never able to replicate that kind of success. And it's essentially like trying to be Pepsi to Coke. You almost have to go about it a totally different way. If you're to bring in a Reale, bring in a Kay Adams, bring in a Max Kellerman, maybe there's a way to do it. I don't know what that show looks like. Can you try to do an Around the Horn 2.0 on FS1? Like, is there a way to do it? Maybe. Would that work well as a morning show? Not entirely sure that it would. Could you try to build a show around Kay Adams in the same way that like Good Morning Football exists and try to do something with like her and Kellerman? Maybe. Could that be enticing enough to get people into your network and to actually give it a shot? Perhaps. But like, I don't think that you can do a watered down version of what ESPN does. So you have to be really careful. And that leads us to the biggest news of the day, because before the show went live, in a move that I am quite frankly shocked by, FS1 is about to get very interesting. And Fox Sports as a whole is poised to get very, very interesting as well. Because Awful Announcing put this up. But every time I try to pull up Awful Announcing on this show, my computer practically crashes. But we'll bring up the Andrew Marchand tweet, because Marchand's the one who's usually at the forefront of this stuff. Let's go over to his tweet. If FS1 wants to go to war with ESPN, if FS1 wants to get a passionate viewership behind content, this might do it. It might. So Andrew Marchand tweets out, Barstool and Fox Sports are in advanced talks that would see top Barstool personalities, including Dave Portnoy and Big Cat, appearing as part of new FS1 daily programming lineup leading into Colin Cowherd at noon, while Portnoy would be part of Big Noon Kickoff, sources confirmed. Okay. Let's play that one out for a second, shall we? Let's shall. If you can't do, or you shouldn't do, the same thing that ESPN is doing, let's say they think that some combination of Kellerman, Reale, and Kay Adams would be like doing a lesser version of what ESPN is. I don't think it is. I think actually if you put at least two of those three on a show at the same time as Get Up, it probably could beat Get Up. I do think that there's a path to like those personalities going head to head with Get Up. You're probably not going to beat ESPN, but you could certainly take a chunk of the viewership away. With the Tony Reale, beloved. If you are anywhere near my age, or slightly younger or slightly older, you have a very favorable opinion of Tony Reale. He's not a shock jock. Seems like a genuinely decent human being. Felt like he kind of got shafted at the end with ESPN. People would support a Tony Reale show. Kay Adams, very well liked. Those two together on a morning show could be dynamite. I really like Max Kellerman. Not everybody does, but a lot of people do. Could he also factor into something in a morning show, again, that could go head-to-head with Get Up? I think they could. But you can't use that show to counter-program First Take. As much as people might hate watch First Take, as much as people might not like First Take at all, I don't think that that's a show that you can counter-program with a more like fair, balanced, kind of fun morning show. I don't think you can. But what you can do is bring Dave Portnoy on board. Bring Barstool. Bring some version of Pardon My Take. Bring those kind of shows and that kind of programming. Why? Because it's going to fire up that Barstool viewership, listenership, readership. You're going to have a unbelievably loyal following of people that are now going to tune into FS1 to back their guys. It will happen. I can't say it won't fail, but you have a significantly better chance of seeing that kind of show work counter-programming to First Take than having anybody else come up or having anybody who was already on one of these other shows take over a spot. If you're really looking to upset the apple cart, to me, it's some combination of Reale, Kay Adams, and Max Kellerman in the morning to counter-program, Get Up. Bring the Barstool guys on. Bring Big Cat. Bring Portnoy. Have those guys go head-to-head at the same time as Stephen A. Smith. And let the chips fall where they may. And if you do it, you have to be committed to it. This can't be like a 2-3 month test. And in fairness, if you're bringing Barstool in, they're smart. They will figure out a way to give themselves an actual chance at success. If you do that, and you get through an entire football season, and you haven't taken a significant chunk out of ESPN's viewership at that point, well, then fine, that's a different conversation. But I would almost assume that if you can do that, you bring those guys in to counter-program Stephen A. Smith, it would be a lot of fun to watch. Who the hell knows what would happen? And again, FS1, certainly not as available in as many homes as ESPN. If you're a cord cutter and you have Hulu, you might package in ESPN. It's a little bit different. But man, that's the way to do it. Like, that would actually be kind of fun to watch. This theoretical Kay Adams, Reale, Kellerman show, some combination of that against Get Up, that could be fun. Portnoy and Barstool versus Stephen A. Smith in First Take, that would be a lot of fun. And then you get into your next window, which is what? Coward versus McAfee. Would be fun. Could be interesting. If nothing else, it would give you legitimate options. If you are a cable subscriber, if you are somebody who likes to watch sports content on TV, it would actually give you a viable alternative. In fairness to all the people who have been let go from FS1 or whose shows have been canceled or whose contracts haven't been renewed, those shows were never going to beat what ESPN had. And again, even with hate watching, right? Even with the people who say they can't stand First Take, those people weren't leaving to go to what FS1 had to offer. This is different. Chris Fried says, stab me with a spoon. He said, this will prompt me to watch as much of FS1 and ESPN as I do now, which is 0. Let's see. Anthony DeGrazio says, I'm cool with hot take shows, but not back-to-back-to-back-to-back hot take shows with no substance. And that's where the problem lies with ESPN right now. Is there a way to try to intersperse that? with some level-headed stuff. ESPN isn't doing it right now. Could FS1? Maybe. All right, that's it for today's show. We talked Flyers schedule. We talked Jalen Hurts disrespect. Kyle Schwarber being an absolute stud in the All-Star game. And even more updates from FS1. And I didn't botch Joy Taylor's name today. But in fairness, Ford has counted how many times I said in fairness, and he said it's 11. But that would now be 12 and 13. So we might be at 13. Somebody else will have to give Ford a run for his money. Go back and find out how many times I said that exact phrase on the show. Do me a favor if you haven't done so already. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Liking the video, believe it or not, really does help a ton. It helps this channel. It helps this show. It helps this episode end up in more YouTube subscribers' recommended feed, and people who don't subscribe to the channel, it shows up in their recommended video tab. So liking the video, as simple as that may seem, really does help. If you comment on the video, whether it's in the live chat or in the regular comment section after the fact to tell me what you agree with, what you disagree with, whatever, that also helps. It's like a good signal to YouTube that people are actively engaged. Now, I could see this, and you could see it throughout the show in the comment section on the screen. There are a lot of people who like to jump in and get in that conversation throughout the show, but having some of those regular comments in the regular comment section after the fact, that helps as well. You can also share the video. Share it to a loved one, a friend, a family member, an ex-girlfriend, whatever. Share it to them. They won't watch it. Maybe they will. Man, if they do, they can tell somebody else, and maybe eventually this channel will grow even more leaps and bounds than it already has since the start of 2025. So, just saying. And Video Guy Amadeo here with a plug. Like the shorts, it helps my ego. Correct. Greg Bondarenko here with a really beautiful, nice thing. Says, thanks for a great show as always, Russ. No, thank you. Thank you for being here. And Greg also says, no complaints about the weather today. By the way, I mentioned this a little bit ago. I'll offer an update on Friday. I did a brisket last night. I did not buy the Egg Genius that's supposed to control the temperature consistently through the night. I did have a couple of spikes. I had some dips in the temperature. I had some spikes in the temperature. The temperature of the brisket itself remained pretty consistent throughout the night. It's currently sitting in a cooler, wrapped in butcher paper. If it looks good, I will boast about it on social media. If it does not look good, I will weep silently. But I should have an update for all of you on Friday. Not that you care, but I'm sure you do. Brisket number 1 on the Big Green Egg. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, have a wonderful Wednesday. Thanks for being here. If you like listening in podcast feeds, you can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Talk to each and every one of you on Friday here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye now.